What would you do if you were sent back in time to medieval Europe without warning, bringing only what you could fit in a suitcase? Would you try to find a way back home, or thrive with your modern knowledge? Even if you decided to make your mark on the world, would you even survive the Black Death, the Mongolian invasions, the living conditions, or even the medieval society itself? In this video, your estranged lore dad will be taking a serious, well-considered look into what a time travel situation like this would look like, with an included CK3 mod and challenge inspired by it. But before we explore the mod, we need to properly set the stage. Considering my channel's focus on alternate history and the butterfly effect, it should be no surprise that I'm a big fan of time travel media. Back to the Future and Steins Gate are both among my favorite shows of all time, as not only are they great stories, but they also use the butterfly effect in order to study the impact that our decisions have on the world. One day, while I was playing the new Crusader Kings III DLC, I designed a character that suited myself and started playing around with the world, but I quickly abandoned the campaign. While I was able to make my own decisions and roleplay as myself, my wife and kids weren't there, so it didn't feel the same. In order to make it more engaging, I started a simple Crusader Kings III mod where I added my family as our own landless adventurer group. But then I expanded this idea to become a lot more complicated. Thanks to the help of Michael P. on Fiverr, I now have the framework to explore a very compelling alternate history scenario that I'm excited to share with you. What if me, my family, and my YouTube community were spontaneously sent back in time to 1187? This all would start where my family and I decided to travel to Europe for an IRL meetup with some of my online friends and YouTube community members in London. We all meet up and we celebrate the fact that we're finally able to talk in real life. But suddenly, we're sent back in time, all the way to the high medieval era. We would initially think that there's just a Renaissance fair going on that we didn't know about, until we hear the peasants and knights talking in languages that were simultaneously familiar, yet completely foreign to us. Primitive forms of French and English. We check our phones. There's no signal, nor places to charge them. We have no means of checking exactly what year it is, or have any way to replicate the phenomenon that sent us to an unknown year in the past. We all begin to panic, unsure how to proceed. In order to avoid significant issues for being outsiders wearing strange clothes and possessing technology that, if seen by anybody, would cause us to be burned at the stake, we would set up a camp just shy of the outskirts of town in order to regroup and assess our situation. While a majority of us lack survival skills, Nat, who's hunted in his lifetime before the time travel, would manage to secure us food to eat and survive without risking exposing ourselves to the public, while the rest of us had built makeshift shelters with the help of Solo, who'd gone through a scouts program in the past, or, well, the future. After establishing a camp, a few of us had gone into town in order to gather more information, where we learned that the Plantagenet dynasty had just recently ascended to the throne of England. With this information, we would be able to roughly estimate our historical date to around the mid-1100s. In this period of history, Iberia would be split between Christian kingdoms in the north and Muslims in the south. France would have half of its territories occupied by the English, the Byzantine Empire would be losing more and more territory to the Sultanate of Rum, and King Baldwin would be in charge of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. While gaining a general knowledge of our surroundings was helpful, we were also aware of the most infamous aspects of this period of history, the Mongolian invasions and the Black Death. While we may be vaccinated against most common diseases in our modern era, we would still be vulnerable to the ancient strains, and the Black Death itself would still be a threat. We would be able to avoid the dangers of the Mongolian invasions if we simply positioned ourselves far away, but if we had, it would be at the cost of losing the largest library of knowledge in this period of history, the Baghdad House of Wisdom. The Baghdad House of Wisdom was the culmination of the entire Islamic Golden Age. Scientific advancements made during the Islamic Golden Age are still being used to this day, with the most important being the Arabic numeral system, replacing the Roman numeral system, and including the concept of the number 0, which had been holding back the Roman numeral system from advanced mathematics. There could have been far more scientific breakthroughs in this era that would be held within these walls, but since the library was destroyed, we don't know what was written inside besides speculation. However, if we were able to somehow acquire the knowledge within and translate it into other languages, the knowledge held within the library, the culmination of an entire golden age, could be preserved for the good of all humanity. While we may not be prepared, with no knowledge of the Arabic language nor the customs of this time period, and be deliberately navigating into a region of the world which is due to face significant strife, I take it upon myself to convince the rest of us stranded time travelers to make a positive impact on the future. Who knows? Maybe we can find a way back to the future! This lore is all well and good, but why are we acting so passive and conservative? Simply copying books down? Wouldn't we be at a significant advantage as time travelers? For several reasons, I don't believe this is the case. Usually, when people think about what they'd do if they were sent back in time, they would exploit the technological advances of the modern day to either enlighten or subjugate the people of the past. They think that their smartphones, laptops, and modern weaponry would allow for them to gain a significant edge over anyone. It would naturally place them in a leadership position. But in reality, the smartphones would not be connected to the internet. Even if you have a lot of data downloaded onto it, it's probably just memes. And not how to build a shelter or how to speak medieval French. The average citizen of the modern Western world has a good education compared to a medieval peasant. However, the educational curriculum is designed to be effective for our modern society. There would be no modern conveniences like running water in every home, nor electricity to be able to recharge our phones. And while there may be some people in the past who have had some significant survival training, like Solo and Nut, let's be real, none of us are alpha male gigachads with six-packs who know how to sword fight the level of medieval knights. Maybe we know how to pull off some awesome encirclements, but our tactical experience does not include managing literal armies. This is why, when I see people's answers to this question implying that they'd be legendary conquerors which would manage to surpass the conquerors of our history, I don't believe them. I know that personally, if I was sent back in time, my first instinct would not to be starting a mercenary band, trading in death, and striking weak foes in order to establish their own empire. I would live the same way I've attempted to my entire life. Be firm with what you believe, and kind to all who deserve it. That's why, at least in the beginning of this campaign, I would be a pacifist, choosing instead to travel across the world, gathering and distributing knowledge to all for the benefit of civilization. If this was a planned event, an elite squad of what would essentially be astronauts would be selected and trained in skills which would allow for them to adjust accordingly. They would have a comprehensive understanding of the environment, be fluent in all relevant old versions of modern languages, be informed regarding the political situation, and be sent to a safe place where they would be able to begin advancing civilization far further than what would be possible for the era of societal development in that period of time. But in my scenario, it wouldn't be planned at all. And while I'm sure that my audience is particularly bright as they have amazing taste in YouTube videos, please subscribe, we would be far less prepared than others who would have trained for this exact situation. So what do we actually have to offer? What sort of advantages do we have that we could use to allow us to survive? Well, besides our general understanding of history, our modern education, which enables us to do simple maths, and basic understandings of key inventions in our time period, unfortunately not a lot. However, there's a book that would be extremely advantageous specifically for this scenario, granting us knowledge that we could share with the rest of the world and allow for human civilization to advance at a far faster rate that we could ever probably even comprehend. How to Rebuild Civilization by Hungry Minds, the sponsor of today's video. The How to Rebuild Civilization book is simultaneously a beautiful book which showcases the ingenuity of the human species, showcasing inventions from all over the world, but also a practical how-to in order to ensure the continued prosperity of humanity just in case. Now, in our scenario, we wouldn't be needing to rebuild civilization from scratch, but all the information that we would need in order to even start building a civilization in Siberia would be in this book, giving details for basic survival necessities like harnessing the power of fire, the basics of farming, and teaching you how to find clean water to drink. But since in our scenario, we'll be interacting with a society that already has these functions, we can use the knowledge within the book to develop more advanced structures like windmills and water wheels. With our large illustrations in simple language, the book would be accessible to anybody who finds a copy. What I'm especially grateful for is the inclusion of coffee makers, which would allow for us to break the monopoly that the Islamic world had over coffee at this point of history, which is basically a survival necessity for me. But the inventions don't stop there. They outline every important invention that we could ever need to rebuild our world, including Loreboy's favorite invention, trains. Needless to say, in this scenario, access to this wealth of information would be invaluable. So despite its design being oriented for a social setting, I definitely will be bringing this book with me next time I travel to Europe, just in case. This book is really incredible, and I'm extremely grateful to Hungry Minds for being this channel's first sponsor. If you're interested in getting this book, please use my code LORDAD10 and use the link down below to get 10% off. Now that we have a better understanding of the ace up our sleeve, let's look into exactly how we can use this knowledge to benefit society. While the knowledge held within this book would allow for us to be extremely helpful to any and all who would cross our path, we would also have our electronics, phones, laptops, tablets, and other items that we may have brought with us in order to communicate with each other or entertain us when we were alone. Unfortunately, as mentioned earlier, without satellites or electricity being invented, these modern inventions are, as they are right now, bricks, with no actual advantage besides minor parlor tricks like using the flashlight. While we may be able to access any important information we have stored on our phones, we can't reach anything that would be on the cloud, so any information held within is likely not a benefit to us currently. However, what if we had managed to preserve these electronics until electricity and computing were invented? What if, in the future, when industry had advanced to the point where these sorts of future technologies could be dissected, studied, and potentially duplicated? What sort of astronomical breakthrough would this have if a genius who had managed to get their hands on this device and unlock the secrets of the modern world within? If we were able to survive this foreign yet familiar world, gain control of land, preserve the electronics, and give civilization a kickstart thanks to our modern knowledge, we could potentially bring the marvels of 2025 centuries earlier than our history. It would be an incredible feat. In order to gain any sort of advantage for our future generations, we would need to be covert and adapt to the political systems of the time. But would our future generations believe the stories that their grandfathers had told them? Would they have the same benevolent wishes that we had of peaceful modernization? Or would they use that knowledge that we've accrued against their foes maliciously? That is the premise of this scenario, and I hope you're as excited for it as I am, because we're about to look at the Crusader Kings III mod. With help from Michael P. on Fiverr, we were able to set up a Crusader Kings III mod where we featured these unique aspects of the scenario, including the handful of people from the community. While I value every member of our community in our Discord and YouTube comments, I prioritize depicting channel members, thank you for your support, IRL friends, and other key community managers. It's worth noting that these personalities, educations, sexual orientations, and ages are, besides my family members, guesses, as I didn't find it very appropriate to be asking a bunch of my audience members these questions. Instead, I randomly assigned their birthdays to resemble the average age of my viewership and allowed for the game to generate the remaining features of their personalities. Besides the exception of Serov, who's unabashedly Russian, each of our characters is set as the modern Western culture and Catholic. While I'm personally not Catholic, in this situation, where we need to be able to blend into our surroundings, I would adopt the religion to adapt, taking lessons from actual Catholics in our camp in order to avoid being accused of heresy, but more on that later. One thing I really want to see is how our descendants interact, so I've made it that every single character spawns with the time traveler trait, and every descendant to these original travelers have the traveler descendant trait. These traits don't give much benefit besides increasing mutual opinion, but it does give us an easy way to keep track of our lineage. The culture of modern Western is more of a blanket culture meant to show that we all speak modern English rather than Old English, and have a far more culturally tolerant sentiment than the average Englishman at this point of history. While the How to Rebuild Civilization book would certainly allow for the modern Western culture to have all innovations unlocked, I'd instead opted to match English's modern innovations to keep things balanced. While this mod is really great, and you can play it however you want, become a conqueror if you want to as Lordad, share your campaigns in the Discord. I wanted to roleplay this scenario very hard, and in order to make sure I did it properly, I have some guidelines I'm going to follow. While in most Crusader Kings III campaigns as a landless adventurer, people usually make sure that they become major conquerors and change world history. However, in this scenario, I'm attempting to roleplay as much as possible, including my lack of desire to conquer the world or perpetuate bloodshed. So for the beginning of the campaign, as Lord Dad and Lord Boy, we will likely not be seeking to gain land through any aggressive means. This limits our ability to gain territory a sizable amount, but would still allow for us to begin the societal development of a small region of the world at the very least. As someone who really likes time travel fiction, I would want to make as little of an impact on civilization as possible. While we still have the means to incredibly improve the standard of living of all people in this world, there's a possibility that through intervening directly in the world, we would, due to the butterfly effect, doom civilization entirely. While we may be attempting to avoid changing history as much as possible, our very existence will cause history to change in ways we cannot possibly predict. Every berry we pick off a bush, every animal we hunt, every ship we charter to a foreign shore, all will cause the fates of millions of people we've never met to be affected in some way, shape, or form, either leading to a prosperous or devastated Europe. In order to make up for our impact on the world, we would seek to take only what we need and provide the communities that we interface with the knowledge that we accrue. Another aspect of this isolationism is that we would need to hide the fact that we're time travelers, exposing any information that we know today as fact, like the Earth being round, that lead is a neurotoxin that shouldn't be put in our wine, and the Earth revolves around the sun. We'd be seen as heretics and lead to our deaths. So unless we manage to convince everybody that we're demigods somehow, that doesn't really make much sense to me. Although I have considered that. As the generations go on, potentially around generation 4 or 5, it's possible that this pacifism and isolationism aspect of the gameplay would be irrelevant. The stories of how their ancestors were descended from time travelers set on the quest to bring the modern age to those in the Middle Age would be seen as fictitious legends meant to increase the legitimacy of the Kronos dynasty. However, our doctrine of societal development and the supernatural nature of the feat of time traveling may lead to the foundations of a new religion. I have represented this as a custom religious tenet called divine modernity, which makes the trait descendants of time travelers a virtue and provides the megalith structure for temples and duchy buildings. My logic behind this feature of the tenet is to emulate a desire to build large structures or foundations for future buildings like skyscrapers in order to help develop their nations. While I've coded this religious tenet in, I don't expect to be founding a new religion with this tenet. While it would be extremely beneficial to our gameplay challenge of developing the world as much as possible, I also don't see me, Lord Boy, or any third generation descendant taking this stance. If the circumstances are correct, then this would be a perfect way to represent the evolution of the time traveler myth. But we will need to see how the gameplay progresses. The How to Rebuild Civilization book is extremely overpowered, and that's because it is. Use my code. However, since my copy of the book is written in English, it would be best accessible to someone who could read English. But the English of our modern era is completely different than the English of the past, so any English citizen wouldn't be able to read it completely. I'll be setting a self-restriction, which prevents me from using this book unless my character speaks the modern English language. While it would be easy for me to achieve my own ambitions and play the game normally, I want to attempt to incorporate the wishes of the people I've added into this mod into my decision making, while obeying all these rules and keeping good roleplay to ensure that the line of succession of these electronics are consolidated and remain with our ancestors. While our dynasty may split apart into fractured pieces, and we may not be able to see eye to eye again, our vision should always be the same: preserve the relics of the future, and bestow them upon society once they've produced bright enough minds and the technology has advanced far enough that the information within can be accessed, or the engineering of the electronics can be reverse engineered. If I'm somehow able to achieve these conditions, and you're all interested, the potential of this campaign to become a mega campaign is definitely something I'd be open to exploring. But for now, I want to use this video as a means to explain the general approach of this challenge. The initial framework for this video, I'd hoped to feature gameplay of the mod for the second half. However, I found that I was rushing the experience and attempting to gain an arbitrary goal rather than truly exploring the roleplay of the experience. So instead, I wanted to make this a live streaming event. In 2 days from the publishing of this video, I'll be streaming the first session of this challenge. I'll be naming my in-game children after people who are active during the stream and attempt to incorporate your directions into our campaign, so please join up if you're interested. Thank you again to Hungry Minds for sponsoring this video, Michael and Fiverr for developing the mod, and Duct Taped Media for editing this video. Please check the description for all relevant links. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, and I hope you have a good day.